Hey, we're kicking off another episode of the Ice Team Podcast. This is actually going to be our last one of the season. I got a special guest, two special guests. You guys already know Jason Durham. He's going to be calling in here in a second. Actually, we're going to call him. And I got Tom Hine here from Clam. Tom has been instrumental behind the scenes on pretty much everything we do here, from setting up for shows, loading trailers, getting ready for photo shoots, events. He's been at everything. So I thought it'd be fun to have him join us as we recap the season, tell some fun stories, and probably have a few laughs. So what do you think, Tom?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. It's been a great season. Looking forward to recapping everything, and yeah, should be a good time.
You've been a busy dude, and I say that loosely because I know how much work you put in to an ice fishing season. So, man, thank you so much. I know anyone listening, if they see anything clam related, you probably had your fingers in it in some way, shape, or form.
Yep, that's for sure. It's a labor of love, definitely.
Nice. Should we call Durham?
Let's do it.
I mean, we're kind of opening up a can of worms here, but let's give this dude a call. I think I'm doing this right. Oh, it's ringing. Let's see if he answers. Is he going to ghost us?
Hello.
Oh, we got you. Can you hear us?
I can hear you guys loud and clear.
Nice. I love it. We got you patched in here to our Rode Procaster audio board here. Drew taught me the way, and I think we're doing the right thing right now. I think everyone's on board.
Awesome.
So we got, I just introduced Tom briefly, let everyone know he pretty much carries this building on his shoulders and everything we do at Clam, and have him joining us. And this is our chance to maybe reminisce a bit, tell some people some things we learned this season. And I am going to say Jason's got some stories if I know Jason Durham.
I have 150 stories, half of which you want to hear, all of which are truthful. I will say that.
Of course.
One thing with fish stories is I don't elaborate. I don't add things in that aren't true. But man, what a winter.
Yeah.
It has been, it's so interesting. Every year is interesting. People want to talk about whether it's global warming, just a warming trend, a change, a shift in the environment, whatever it is. Things are different.
Right.
Things are different. I'll start out with a story. I actually went eel pout fishing last week with John Holmgren, and we went midday because a lot of people don't realize during the spawn and after the spawn for burbot, the day bite is actually better than after dark. Oh. And so we went midday up on Cass Lake, and we were able to get out with a truck only because one resort was still plowing a road. We still had to take a snowmobile about 100 yards. And we were catching, and we didn't catch many, but we caught a couple eel pout that were post-spawn. They're all spawned out. And I'm looking around, and it doesn't feel right. Because typically when we're in that situation, the water, the ice is honeycombed a bit. There's water flowing down the holes. The holes get bigger and bigger every day that you come back fishing. And we catch these eel pout, and I'm looking around going, this feels like midwinter.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just surreal.
Yeah.
And we didn't encounter much for flooding. But the thing that was notable, when you drill a hole, and there's a lot of snow out on the ice up here right now, when you drill a hole, the water was right up to the top of the hole. So that means you had a ton of weight sitting on that ice. So what do you predict? What do you think it's going to look like in this late ice period? Are we going to have those fish transition into their typical areas? Is it going to go so fast that we're hardly going to get to experience it? What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see something happen quick. And it's funny because you mentioned looking around on the ice midwinter, right, the other day. And it's funny because today we're recording this. It's, April 4th. Yesterday, April 3rd, I had a memory on Facebook pop up 2 years ago where I'm in the boat on Lake Minnetonka chasing crappies. Yeah. And for the bite to be good, Jason and Tom, it's not just like the first day the ice came off, we hopped out there, right? You need the water to warm up a bit. You need the crappies to make some of their movements. So not only were we on the water on April 3rd 2 years ago, but we were catching. So, and yesterday I was on the ice on April 3rd on 20 inches. in the Twin Cities. So talk about a drastic swing. But no, to your point, what I saw happening yesterday, which was unique. I've been on this particular lake for a few weeks chasing crappies and bluegills. They started to move shallow a few weeks back when we started to get a few warm days. And they kind of stalled out there in those shallow weeds, 4 to 7 feet of water. But what happened yesterday is we actually had a creek break open on the northwest corner of this lake, and that's where these fish were sitting. It actually broke open, and the water was so dirty that much like the Rainy River, when those inlets break open, it's time to go home. All the fish in that North Bay slid out to the basin. So they made an awkward migration. I don't think necessarily for the spring, just with all of the snow and all the things happening around. I don't think these fish were accustomed to having that happen, and nor have I seen it happen on that lake. But it was clear and obvious when you cut a hole anywhere in that region of the lake, it looked like just dirty, scummy coffee water that came up out of that hole. And then when you went about 100 yards south on the same lake, you had moderately clear water, and the fish pushed out of those shallow weeds. So I think what's going to happen here, at least in the Twin Cities for us, because if I'm not mistaken, Jason, aren't you going to get like a foot of snow tonight and tomorrow?
Yeah, it's actually blowing like mad and snowing like crazy right here. And we have a lot of snow right now. We had what I referred to all season long as arguably the best travel conditions in the entire state, where I could even pull my wheelhouse anywhere I wanted without a plowed trail. And probably a month ago, things really took a shift. And now you can only get out with snowmobiles or track vehicles, and even track vehicles. Some track vehicles are getting stuck, which is a nightmare.
Yeah.
If you've ever dealt with that. But even four-wheelers were getting stuck. You can take your previous experience and you can say, okay, because we're at this date, this is going to happen. And you have these assumptions of what's supposed to happen. Mm-hmm. But the environment plays such a role. Time is still a big thing. You have the photochromic period, the amount of daylight that influences fish behavior. But, I think it makes it interesting for sure.
Right.
Because if it was the same every year and everything was predictable on a set schedule, this keeps it fresh, and it's a challenge. And that's the intrigue of fishing, is that you have a new challenge each day.
Yeah. I think we're going to lose our ice in the Twin Cities quick. And I say that because we don't have the snow. We have the shorelines are in pretty good shape. We took snow dogs out yesterday, and it was a big part of the story. We had to get through to some spots and do some things. But there's lakes around where you're still seeing some people driving trucks. I would not do it. Not here. Not a chance. Because just in the time we were out there, we actually saw some pretty substantial pockets open up by the access where it was absolutely hard when we left in the morning. Mm-hmm. And those pockets would end your day in a hurry if you were in a vehicle. So, and we're calling for 50s and 60s this weekend in the Twin Cities. And what do we see, Tom, next week? 75 degrees for the Twin Cities.
Oh, my gosh.
Yep.
So the end is near here, which I'm an ice fishing nut, just like the both of you. But, hey, it's April. Let's go chase some. I want to chase some springtime crappies before I get into guide mode and really have to hammer down. And that's one of my favorite times of year, is those crappies in the boat.
Oh, for sure. And we would easily be able to take trucks out here. Typically, up in our area, we're about 2 weeks behind what the metro area is. And it's amazing to think that we live in the same state, but there's so much difference in temperature just in that couple 100 miles. But you can't take a truck out here right now because, number one, none of the accesses are getting plowed because fish houses had to be off, and that's the main reason that people plow the accesses. So getting to the lake would be one thing, but you get stuck. Last weekend, I was up in Natiwash, Minnesota at the Gens Invitational, which is Dave Gens' annual event, where he invites about 100 friends. It's like a family reunion, but it is a fishing tournament too. And it's definitely low stress, low key. But people are coming from everywhere. I mean, multi states to come to this event. And if you didn't have a snowmobile, you're in a bad situation. Four-wheelers, I talked to multiple people who got stuck for hours with four-wheelers. And one group came up from Iowa, and they brought a Willcraft. Mm-hmm. And thinking that in the past there have been years where we haven't even been able to take snowmobiles because the ice has pulled away from the shoreline so far that you couldn't take a machine out there. So they brought their wheelcraft. Well, unfortunately, then it would get high centered and they got stuck multiple times. So snowmobile is the only way to go right now. And then what happens when you have that quick thaw too, and you just introduce so much runoff in a short period of time? Does it affect the fish? 100%.
Right.
100%. And we don't know how things are going to play out until we get to that point. We do have a few lakes this year that are experiencing some winter kill. And I talked to our local DNR, our fisheries, about it because I had heard that they had sampled dissolved oxygen in one of our small lakes. It's fairly shallow, max depth of about 16 feet. And they said, no, we actually don't monitor dissolved oxygen anymore. And the main reason is they said they don't get an overall picture of the entire fishery. Really, the only way that they can tell the impact is to wait for the lake to thaw and then see, how many fish you've got washing up on shorelines. But he did say they had a crew here from the University of Minnesota who were doing a full lake profile on this particular body of water. And they said they, using underwater cameras, witnessed and encountered a lot of dead fish on the bottom. So if you think about this, if the fish are on the bottom, what has happened is those fish have died. They floated up underneath the ice. They've decomposed to a point where the air has released from their air bladder, which is not a quick process. And then they've drifted back down to the bottom. So this winter kill has been going on for quite a while. And he did report that anglers had said they, weren't catching fish out there for a while. So then back up to this event that I went to last weekend, the Gens Invitational, which is on North and South Twin Lake in Nadawash. Well, North Twin will put out bigger fish than South Twin in terms of bluegills and crappies. Perch, it's the opposite. And I had heard reports from multiple anglers that have been out there that they caught absolutely nothing. And some locals had even gone out and plowed big areas to try to let sunlight into the lake, drilling holes, try to increase oxygen. And there weren't fish biting, so everybody fished on South except one group. And they went to North Twin, and they had the biggest bluegill, the biggest crappies, the biggest rock bass, second place in all of those categories. They found some of those fish. So there's a lesson that I learned. I kept telling myself, go with my gut. Go with my gut that I know the bigger fish are going to come from there, even though you might not get as many bites. Those fish are present. And it just goes back to the whole idea. If you want to catch big fish, you have to go where big fish live. Right. And I should have done that.
So how'd you do?
I had the seventh biggest crappie, which was 1.17 pounds. The big crappie for the event was 1.62.
Oh, a good one.
Also, that was a big fish. And there were a few in that category, all coming from that body of water that has simply bigger fish. The fun thing though, like I say, it's like a family reunion. Got to see so many people that sometimes I only see them at this one event. But one of the fish that was so exciting were the bass. And obviously the bass season's closed here, but when you're fishing for bluegills and crappies and just constantly encountering them and having a big bend in the rod, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you mentioned the winter kill and the fish on the bottom of the lake, because a lot of people, I think, assume if you don't see them washed up on shore that, the lake, nothing happened. And we've seen it around here multiple times where those fish are just littered on the bottom of the lake and you can't see them unless you put a camera down, like you said. And so a lot of that winter kill actually happens earlier than people think. So some of those fish have been dead for weeks. Like you said, it's not just a spring issue. The lake could winter kill much earlier than ice out. And it can really put a hindrance on that body of water. And I've seen that happen before. And, where you drop the camera down and it's just sad sight of just dead fish on the bottom of the lake. So
one thing about winter kill too that people have a misconception of is a lot of people think, especially if you're not from Minnesota or along the ice belt, is they think that the lake freezes entirely, that the ice goes all the way down to the bottom of the lake, which is not the case. They just need oxygen, aeration, right?
Right.
But that whole process too, when those fish die, that decomposition process, whether it's vegetation or animal, uses up oxygen for that. So it's kind of like this double-edged sword that it just continues to exacerbate for sure.
Right.
No, but winter kill isn't necessarily a bad thing either.
Right.
That fish need space to grow, and so when you eliminate some of these fish, sometimes you get fish that grow even bigger, and that's not a bad thing. When the DNR puts fish into their stock ponds, their walleye rearing ponds, they actually put them into bodies of water that they expect will winter kill. And the main reason is when they introduce more fry into those rearing ponds, they don't want existing fish that are bigger in there because they'll just eat all the fry. So it's really a 1-year cycle that they're expecting, or sometimes 2.
Yeah. Some of my better bluegill lakes within an hour and a half of my house in the Twin Cities are lakes that are known to winter kill. Just because I think they do produce better quality fish when they have those good year cycles. Usually those lakes can have the opportunity to be more fertile and grow fish quicker. I've always seen that to be the case. It's kind of a double-edged sword, though, but I got a lake right now I'm fishing that has winter killed many times in my life, but in a matter of years, it grows quality fish, where some of these other lakes that are clearer, probably more, let's call it competitive for forage, these fish don't grow as quick. They're not going to bounce back as fast, where you see some of these quote-unquote winter kill lakes in 4 years' time kick out quality fish, where some of these lakes that have sustained great oxygen and have flourished, some of these fish take 8-10 years to grow to that same capacity. So,
exactly. It's simple biology. You can only have so many pounds of fish per acre of water. It's like you can't grow a 20-pound bass in a 10-gallon aquarium. It just doesn't have the space, the food, all of that. And it's the same for the lake. If you get too many fish in there, they just can't grow. Yeah,
fish in space. So how many filet fish can fit in Jason Durham's belly?
I have not eaten at McDonald's for probably 10 years.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, at this event, at the Gens Invitational, was the first time I ate fish for sure all year.
Oh, wow.
I know. I actually don't keep many fish. People ask me all the time, well, as a fishing guide, I'm sure you eat fish like every day. I don't. I clean fish for other people. I don't like the process of cooking fish, the mess it makes, the time it takes, because I want to spend my time fishing.
Yeah.
Not cooking the fish.
Right. So Jack's Pizzas get a beat down in the Durham household.
No, most of the time I eat my meals standing in front of the refrigerator with the door open.
Okay. Fair enough.
I want it done in 5 minutes or less.
This is coming from a guy that cooks cheese on a boat.
I love to cook. I love to cook.
Yeah.
In fact, you might not know this, Matt. I hold a very prestigious position within the school where I teach. I am the Nevis Public School Wellness Committee Potluck Coordinator.
Ooh.
I know. It's kind of a big deal.
I'm going to get you a badge for that one.
I actually already have one. I ordered one for that.
Of course he does.
Yeah. And then I ordered 5 other badges for food critics. So I choose 5 people a month. They're the food critic, and we give out a trophy for best in show each month. And I've actually won it 3 times this year.
I am not surprised.
For cooking, not for bringing, a plate of lunch meat and cheese.
Well,
I'll give you what I won with last week, and you're going to be impressed. Homemade potato chips.
Yeah.
With smoked Gouda cheese, blue cheese crumbles, bacon, lingonberries, and green onions.
Wow.
That sounds good.
What are lingonberries?
Imagine a blueberry that's a little more tart.
Yeah, like a gusher.
No. But the whole salty sweet combination, it's heaven.
Nicely done.
If you're listening, try it out. It's pretty simple. Make the chips, put all the stuff on it, and you're good to go.
Like we know you're a chef because we've seen you cook at Pro Day. We've even seen your outfit with the mustache. So I think anyone that is listening that's on the Clam Pro staff or any of our partners that have been to Pro Day, they know exactly what I'm talking about. Chef Durham makes an appearance usually once a year.
You just got to look the part. If you look the part and you dress like a chef, everybody else thinks that you're a chef, which was so funny because we've got grilling competition champions that are helping out to make the food for this. And they're wearing trucker hats and cut off shorts. And everybody's coming up to me saying, "Oh, the food's so good." My only job was to take the round balls of ground beef out of this giant container and set them on the grill. That's it. I didn't season them or do anything except transport the meat from point A to point B, and I get all the accolades.
Well, perfect. It's your smile,
Beautiful.
Jason.
That's what it is. It must be. It must be.
I mean, I know we've chatted a lot about different stories this season and things like that. We had a lot of phenomenal guests on. I mean, we were, when we had this idea of doing a podcast, I know you and I, Jason, talked months and months ago about this, and when it came to fruition, our excitement was awesome. We started brainstorming. I think we got a lot of the people on we wanted to get on. I mean, there were some that we wanted to that it didn't work out, or we just couldn't make it happen. And that will. I mean, the beauty of it is not to get too ahead of ourselves, but there will be a season 2. We will do this again next year. Actually, I should say we will do this again later this year. We'll probably kick it off again late summer once people start thinking ice fishing again. But we did have some really fun guests. I don't know if you want to take a moment to maybe tell a story or two about a guest. I know Tom, this is Tom's first appearance on the show, but Tom might have a story or two, not to bring up wounds of a sports show or something funny that happened. I don't know, or it'd be a good chance maybe for a few minutes just to kind of reminisce on a fun season and, let our listeners in on maybe a couple inside track stories of something that happened. What do you have, Jason? I could see. I mean, I should probably limit you from not talking about Rylander.
I won't talk about that. That was so much fun. That was so much fun. If you're listening to this podcast and haven't listened to that one yet, the inside story is that what a lot of people don't know is we had to edit out a substantial amount of that episode, partially because I made a mistake and we had to edit that, but my good close friend, colleague, said some swears that I didn't really like, and we had to take entire sentences out. But I think my most memorable one that's from this year, there's two that I think of. One is the first podcast that I did, which nobody heard. And that was with Jeremy Smith.
Yeah.
Where we made multiple mistakes. I'm learning just like life is about learning, right?
Yep.
And when you make a mistake, some people look at it as a setback and they get totally hung up on it. From my educational standpoint, I always look at it as just a lesson. Like, you learned something valuable, take that value and use it. But I interviewed Jeremy Smith from Lindner Media, and the podcast was unusable. And I felt really bad because I took up Jeremy's time. But I looked back at it as this is a lesson learned. But I so wish that everybody was able to see the video, because he did the absolute best impression of a largemouth bass coming up to eat a jig that I've ever seen in my life. And it was so great. But the other one that I think about a lot, I've reflected on it numerous times since this, was the interview with Scott Brower and his daughter, Maren, and him talking about Treasure Island, this island that they would go out to, and they would actually leave coins for their kids to find. And I just thought it was so cool. And Scott, I mean, he is so insightful and just, he's a very spiritual guy. There were multiple times where I was, a little choked up, and still get that way a little bit thinking about it. And he was too, just because, I mean, he's got that emotional insight that I think a lot of people take for granted sometimes.
Right. No, Scott he's a special human being. I mean, anyone that I mean, maybe it's a little exaggerated, but I believe it's true. I don't know if there's anybody that's met Scott Brower that doesn't go away feeling better, right? Like, I would like to think, at least from my perspective on what I know, I don't think that man has any enemies. He seems like just everyone, gravitates towards him. He's just got such a kind heart, and he's so intelligent.
Yes.
Like, freaky intelligent. And if Scott's listening, I mean that in the best way possible. He's just so abstract in how he thinks, not just from a fishing perspective, but from a parenting perspective, like the story you just told. I mean, from probably how he teaches in the classroom, and everything he does, he just has this comforting aura about him, and people, it exudes, and people feed off it. And no, he was one of my definite highlights. If we were talking about that, was the time we got to sit down at the St. Paul Ice Show with him and his daughter and chat, and she got a little dirt on Dad, got to tell us a few stories.
Yeah.
We laughed a little bit.
That was good.
I also really enjoyed the Cox family. I should say Don and two of his kids. That was a lot of fun at the Dakota Angler Ice Institute. Learned some things. I got some of his wife's macaroni or noodles. Phenomenal. I did not know she owned a noodle business. We learned about, what was it called again, Durham, when you float down the river? Tanking. We got to learn about that.
That is still on my to-do list.
Have you done that, Tom?
I've never done it. No.
You know what it is?
I listened to the podcast. Yeah, I do know what it is.
Because I figured Central Iowa.
I've got another team member.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Hey, I'm in. Let's do it, Jason.
That looked like a lot of fun. Well, then to learn just some snippets about him, like let's talk on the fishing side. I think it was Garrett, I believe, who his first fish ever through the ice was an 11 1/4 inch bluegill, if I remember right. His first fish ever, not his first bluegill, his biggest, like the first fish he ever caught ice fishing was 11 1/4 inch bluegill, which to this day, and he's a 30-some-year-old man, is the biggest bluegill of his life. And he caught it when you remember, I think it was like 5, wasn't he, Jason? It was young.
Yeah.
And
he was young.
Could you imagine that being your very first fish ever through the ice? To this day, is still your personal best bluegill. And it's a freak show fish.
That is crazy.
I tell people this all the time, that there's a lot of fish in life that are not memorable. Like when I take clients out, and I'm sure you have the same thing, Matt. You take clients out and they catch a whole bunch of fish. They have their fish fry and everything. They don't remember a single one of those fish unless there's something unique about the way that they caught it, or it's a giant that they put back.
Right.
But it's all those other things. If it was your first fish ever, you are 100% going to remember that fish.
Yeah, that's crazy. No, you're spot on. I mean, and one thing, there was a guy that helped us with a lot of corporate trips here in the Twin Cities. His name is Gary Klingler. You might know him, Jason.
Oh, Big Dog Guide Service. Gary is awesome. I've known Gary for years.
Wonderful. And he works at a Foster Brothers Marine now, selling boats, and just a really good guy. He used to tell us, and I started doing some corporate trips for him. It must have been 20 years ago. And he sit us all down. And some of these corporate trips are like 60, 70 boats, Tom. Like, I'm talking like Lord Fletcher's is full. 300 people come down to go fishing. And he'd always sit us all down before. And you're looking around this group, and you got some real hammers, right? You got the Perry Goods of the world. You have a lot of people that have been there, done that. And Seth Fighter has guided with Big Dog many times on these corporate trips. And he sits everyone down, gives us the lay of the land. Here's who we're taking out. Here's the plan. And he says the same thing at every single one of them. He says, now remember, every fish is important. Don't knock the 2-pound snot rockets, the hammer handle pike, because that might be that person's first fish, biggest fish of their life. So treat every fish, whether it's something you'd shake off at the side of the boat or not, as something very special. And that was advice I got from Gary when I was just kind of starting up guiding, that to this day I still take to heart, that every fish is important, every fish is special, every fish is, to your point, Jason, could be that memory. I had a client one time in Minnetonka mount a 25-inch pike. You know, and anyone listening might go, why would you do that? Because it was him and a grandson, and it was his grandson's biggest fish, and he wanted to get that mounted for him. So in his eyes, that was a very, very special fish, a very, very special moment.
Yeah, I totally agree. I could read you some of my philosophy as a guide. The guy that bought my boat, my last boat, lives out in Ohio and has just gotten his captain's license and is just starting to guide now. And he texted me the other day because he's got his first guide trip ever this next week. And he said, do you have any advice for me? And I'm going to read this to you. I'm going to read this text to you.
Yeah.
And this isn't just for anybody who's guiding. this is for anybody who's taking someone fishing, period. Doesn't matter if it's a kid, if it's a neighbor, if it's your husband or wife. Here's number one. I said, expectations are relative. For some people, catching just a couple fish is a great day. For others, it's limits. Get a feel for your clients so you know the expectation. But keep in mind, the biggest critic of the guide is the guide.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if you're taking your neighbor out. You're going to be the hardest one on your own ego. Number two, people remember specific fish if it's a personal best or if there's a unique story behind it. Even when people rack up lots of fish, it's the experience that brings them back, not the fish. You'll form relationships with the guests to the point where you'll feel guilty about being paid. They become lifelong friends and feel like family. Foster those relationships.
Right.
Number three, there are a ton of people who can catch more fish than you and I, but some can't even hold a conversation. Being able to catch fish is very different than being able to make someone else catch a fish. Sometimes you're in a killer bite, and it's still a challenge to get people to catch fish.
Right.
And number four, never talk specifically about how you did the day before. You can say it was a good day, but if you tell the group you caught 150 perch the day before and you catch 100 today, even though it was a great day, the group feels like they didn't succeed because yesterday was better.
Right. Yesterday's never better though, right?
No. Well, it is in dreams. In retrospect, when you're sitting in the office and you're not able to fish, yesterday was always better.
Right. Right. You're probably wishing yesterday was here looking at the snowstorm you're going to get again.
Yeah.
Greg Jones.
I'm looking at it right now.
Greg Jones was fishing with me yesterday. We were doing a segment for MWO, and he told me that Lake of the Woods is expecting like possibly 2 feet.
Yeah.
Like 20 plus inches of snow through this. Is that true?
It's true, but you don't know what's going to happen until it happens.
Right. Yeah. I don't want to hear that though.
Well, we're going to cancel, have distance learning, e-learning for our students tomorrow because the storm's a lot of wind, a lot of snow. And sometimes parents will get upset about it and say, well, when we were kids, we went to school and stuff like this. Well, we're in the business of protecting your kids.
Right.
That's our main goal. But we're also relying upon a meteorologist, and they're not always dead on bullseye. So we have to, make these calls based on the information that we have. And who knows, maybe we only get 8 inches, but we might we could potentially see 20 inches.
Yeah.
We're hoping not. Maybe it's only going to be 8. Who knows? We'll find out when we get it. But it's kind of like going fishing. You don't know what the fish are going to do. You can make these assumptions based on seasonal patterns, just like we were talking about earlier, but you don't know what the fish are actually going to do until you go.
Right. Right. So what kind of fishing do you have left ahead of you? I know, talking to Jonesy, you guys are going to connect at some point here and do a little fishing. I would imagine
Greg and I are going to do something.
You got a hot crappie bite going or something, or what's biting other than eel pout?
Oh, the eel pout, they finished spawning, so we can still go out and catch them and everything. They're not as aggressive right now, but still a lot of fun to chase, and you're still going to get a lot of action. But the crappies and sunfish, the perch, Leech Lake perch right now are going pretty good, which also means Cass is going, Winnebagosh. Those lakes are always a lot of fun late ice for the big yellow perch, crappies, bluegills. I think this weekend, though, over Easter, I might actually head up to Devil's Lake and spend a little time there just because I've got a 4-day weekend.
Nice.
But haven't totally decided. Some friends of mine were up on Lake Winnipeg last weekend, and they did well, but that walleye season is closed now, so I can't go up there.
Sure. So if you go to Devil's Lake, are you going to connect with Mitchell or Zippy or anybody, or just?
I'm sure our paths will cross.
Nice. I know they got a lot of snow too. Sounds like the snow bear is the main mode of transportation on Devil's Lake this winter, from what I'm hearing.
Exactly.
Oh.
Well, back to the theme that we were talking about the memories from the podcast and memories from this year. I'm curious from Tom. Tom, what stands out in your mind?
Oh, there's a lot that stands out actually. We going all the way back to shows. I think shows are amazing. You get to see all the pro staff from all over the country, and then the consumers as well. You get to talk to the same people or new people every year. So going back, shows are a big thing that stand out to me. Moving on to actually ice fishing, I did get to do something pretty cool this year. Up on Leech Lake, I actually got engaged to my fiance.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, kind of a big deal.
In the whole continuum of life, I mean, that ranks up into like the top 10 for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I mean, buying a new boat,
right.
One,
a few other things, but yeah.
But yeah, congratulations. That's a huge deal.
Yeah,
that's
thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was cool. We went ice camping out on Leech Lake, so it was her first time doing it actually out on the ice. She caught her first walleye, her first burbot, and then it was a good weekend.
That's a great weekend.
Yeah,
it's a good catch, Tom.
Yeah, thank
but
you.
I'm pumped.
That was a good catch. There is something I learned this winter that I thought I'd share with the listeners. I always say that being a guide, there's a lot of times that I'm learning from the clients too, even though they hire me to be the expert. You learn from everybody that you fish with. I don't care how much experience you have. And if you think you know it all, then you've got a lot to learn. But we were going into a small lake that we had to take a minimum maintenance road way through the woods. I mean, we're talking like 2 miles through a road where the brush is tickling the side of your truck. And I checked with these guys ahead of time and said, we're going to be going through this pretty sketchy road. And I had spent hours and hours and hours with a chainsaw cutting trees out from a heavy snowfall that we got and just cutting back some of this brush so it wouldn't damage people's trucks, or my own. And we got just about to the lake. And as we're driving in, I'm thinking, this trail's better than it's been all year because it doesn't get plowed. You just have a goat trail where other people have driven, and it's not many people that go in there. But the client who was following me went out of the rut and got hung up on his front end, and it was buried pretty deep. And his tow hooks were under the front of the truck. So what we did, we couldn't get to him. And so we ran the tow strap underneath the truck and hooked it to the ball hitch. So the entire tow strap was underneath the carriage of the truck. And then we hooked a second one on and hooked that to my vehicle. And the guide client, he does a lot of racing. And so he says, that's how we tow our race cars all the time, is we hook it up on the ball hitch. And it worked like a dream. The one thing I would caution people is you just have to watch your front wheels to make sure you don't get tied up in that tow strap. But man, that was something I had never done before, never even thought of.
I wouldn't either.
So now I've got a new tool in my tackle box of tricks to get people unstuck.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you a stuck story this winter. It happened quite a bit with the snow we got. I was going to do some stuff with one of the outdoor news teams with my son, and this was right after we got, I think, our second heavy snow. It might have been sometime in early February. I can't remember exactly. And we're going to fish a lake, and we were going to take the snow dogs out, but just get to an access where we could park. And in the Twin Cities, it seemed like this winter, like no digging on any city or department or anything. I'm just speaking in general. It seemed like the lots just did not get plowed this winter. It seemed like 90% of the public accesses and lots just did not get touched this winter. And it was a frustration, I know, for a lot of people in and around the Twin Cities trying to just get out and enjoy ice fishing. Well, I went to a specific one, and I remember going into it looking at a 2-tire trail going into the access. And I'm pulling a trailer. And Jack, he's with me, my 15-year-old. And we're going up this little like single lane road to this access. And I've been there before, and I know it goes up and there's a landing pad, and then it goes all the way down to the lake and there's another landing pad where you park. I remember just in my gut going, this is not a good idea. And I'm like, well, I got a 4-wheel drive pickup truck, good tires. I'm pulling a Flow Cargo Max trailer, a couple snow dogs, not a lot of weight. I'm like, oh, I'll just baja through this. Well, now I'm committed because I'm going up this single lane. Literally the only track is just 2 tires. I get to the top and I look down and I see where people are turned around. I'm like, I can do this. excuse me, that was a bad idea. I buried so bad that I had all 4 tires spinning, like just moving on their own, like high centered so bad. And wouldn't you think I don't have a shovel in my truck at the time? Stupid me. I have one in my truck all the time, and I think I took it out because we just got a big snowstorm. I gave it to one of my kids, said, get out there in the driveway and shovel. And so we proceeded to break down branches for an hour and a half so that we could dig out and wedge under our tires so just we can start the day. And it was one of those judgment calls where you just kind of go, you know better at almost 40 years old, you know better. And even when you're now 15-year-old, 14 at the time, said, Dad, probably shouldn't go down there. You know better. But I heard a lot of people getting stuck this year. I think it was a common theme on and off the ice. I don't know exactly. I saw a stat 2 days ago after this last snow. We got what did we get on Saturday, Tom? A foot here?
Yeah, maybe a little less.
10 inches of snow. Yep. It pushed us to the 3rd all time in the history of Minnesota for snowfall. Yeah. And I bet you with this for the Twin Cities, I bet you there's a strong opportunity in your neck of the woods to break the all-time record if you truly get what they think you might get this week. It might be the largest snowfall in the history of Minnesota this winter, which is crazy to think about.
Well, everybody here is talking about opener, obviously, because every day clicks closer to that early May walleye season. And I feel like in the last few years, we've talked about it more and more. We've had, within the last 10 years, the latest ice out on record. And then within that same time period, the earliest ice out on record. So you just never know what's going to happen. If you would have asked me a month and a half ago, I'd say we're going to have early ice out because we didn't have that much ice all season.
Right.
But then with this snow on top of it, the ice can't melt until the snow does.
Right.
And so we're in a sticky situation. When we had the latest ice out, that was in 2013. That was the year that Park Rapids hosted the Governor's Fishing Opener, and I guided Governor Dayton. And we couldn't go on Fishhook Lake because there was still 16 inches of ice out there.
Yeah.
We had even thrown around the idea of actually taking him ice fishing.
Yeah.
And will we have a later ice out this year? I don't know. I have no idea. I have people that ask me every day, because I'm somebody who knows a lot about fishing, that I should know about when the ice is going to go out. I'm not a meteorologist. I'm not Mother Nature. I have the same amount of information as you do. Don't expect me to be an expert on that.
Yeah. I do think we're going to see it go quick because to your point about the ice, we don't have a ton of ice. Really no one, we have well below average ice in terms of thickness. I do think once it starts to melt, we're going to see it go pretty quick. But what's pretty quick? We're already April 4th.
Right.
In theory, literally, actually, not even in theory, literally, we can't go pretty quick. We're already in the first week of April and nothing's really happening yet. So, it might go quick, but we're still going to be behind schedule, in my opinion, no matter how you shake it. And it is what it is. Like you said, you just deal with it. Here's the bright side. I was ice fishing on April 3rd. We caught a bunch of fish. It was fun. You always look at it half glass full and you look at the opportunities. Maybe you got to walk out, but if you want to go ice fishing this weekend, even in the Twin Cities, you can absolutely do it. Just be cautious. I did see some trucks ripping around yesterday on the ice. Like I said, I'm seeing some funky things happening on the lakes to where people just assume because there's 15 inches of ice, you can drive. Well, if there's 15 inches of really good ice that's growing, it's way different than 15 inches of ice that was 24 and it's melting. And people, how much ice is out there? Well, that's not the question you want to ask this time of year. You want to know what the conditions are like, how the ice is performing, or how your augers are cutting. Are you starting to see it soften up? Because I've fallen through 12 inches of ice before, Jason, at late ice.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Because it gets that weak. Here. So it's one of those things where you just have to be mindful. This is definitely not a scare tactic. You could absolutely still be out on foot. You can probably get a wheeler out around if you're careful and watch where you get on and off and pay attention to the axis. The ones on the south side of the lakes seem to be intact a lot more. They don't get as much sun, all those sorts of things. So one thing I always tell people this time of year is look at the lakes you want to fish, maybe have 3, 4, and pay attention to where their access points are, because that can make a big difference on where you go. And another thing I think we chatted about earlier this time of year is just because it looks fine and dandy at 7 a.m. when the sun's coming up, just remember, if you're going to be out there till 4 p.m., 5 p.m., that ice can change in a hurry on the shoreline in 8 hours. So
exactly.
That's one thing people do not think about is, I can drive out right now at 7. Well, you come back at 3 and you might have a problem on your hands. So
exactly. And that's why
it's
having
important.
Having the suits with flotation.
Right.
Is, I mean, that's so imperative right now. If you don't own an ice suit with flotation, you can wear a life jacket.
Yep.
That is a total legitimate thing and highly encouraged.
Right.
But make sure if you can get out on the, make sure you get off.
Right. Right. And I oftentimes, as a fishing guide late ice, and I'm sure you've done this, Jason, too, if I have a certain lake where the conditions might deteriorate or get a little wonky, I'm checking. I mean, it's not uncommon to come back to the axis 3 times during a guide trip just to pay attention every couple hours and say, okay, everything still looks good. I'm not worried. I had a trip one time. This would have been probably 6-7 years ago with Mike and Jackie Aragon. I know you know who they are. They're longtime Ice Team University participants. We went out fishing late ice, took wheelers out, and we drove across the lake. Good ice. I mean, I wouldn't have driven my truck out, but the ice was still fine. Supported wheelers fine. We drove out. And I remember on the way out, there was a crack, probably about 2 inches wide. And you could see down to the water. And we're talking 15 inches of ice, maybe 12 inches of ice. I mean, the ice was going, but we get out to the spot. I remember telling Mike, and I said, we're going to have to keep an eye on that crack. And the crack was probably a quarter mile, half a mile away from us to where we wanted to fish. So like every hour I'd go back, I'd take a look, and I could see that it was, kind of staying the same, whatever. I'm like, oh, this isn't too bad. Well, about an hour later, I remember looking at Mike, and I'm looking back towards the crack, and I could see like this bright line across the lake. Just this like sun beating off this lightning bolt across the lake. I'm like, what is that? And I could hear kind of crackling. I'm like, well, I'm going to go back and check that crack. I rip back, and as I get closer, it actually pushed together. I was watching a heave create in front of my eyes. I was actually seeing that happen, which was insane. And I came back, I'm like, we should probably cross that crack.
Yeah.
So things happen that quick, and it's no joke. It's just something you want to be mindful of.
For sure. I on a guide trip, here's a mistake that I made years ago that I took 2 guys out late ice, and there was a road from the access where people had taken trucks and 4-wheelers over the course of the winter. And there's no snow on the ice at this point, right? And that road with the berms on the side was filled with water. Well, my assumption was there was just runoff sitting in there, whatever. Well, it kind of tapered down at the very end of it. And, it was only a couple feet wide. Well, we went way around it when we walked out, but then on the way back in, it's starting to get dark. The client is walking in front of me. I'm pulling a fish house, and he's walking in front of me, and I'm yelling at him, go around that crack, go way around that crack. And he doesn't listen to me, and he just jumps over it. The second client just jumps over it. And so I went, oh, well, I can do that too. And I jumped across it. My boot hit the berm, and I went straight up to my neck in water. And I was able to put out my arms and pull myself out, but it was a sketchy situation. I'll tell you this, I only lived about 5 minutes from the lake. By the time I hit the front door, I was starting to get hypothermic.
Yeah.
So it happens quick.
Yeah. I do have
Don't make those stupid mistakes.
No.
Don't do that.
I do have a fun fishing story about Tom.
Oh boy.
No, it's a good one. I got to experience one of your PBs.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. Tom, you want to tell him?
Sure. Yeah, we were out a couple weeks ago with some guys from Vexlar, just getting some content and doing some things with them. And these guys put me on the spot. Caught a 10 1/4 inch bluegill, 1.1 pounds, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolute giant.
It was a big one.
That's
yeah,
a
it was
huge
fun.
fish. I saw pictures of it.
Yeah. Yep. I remember Tom. Go ahead.
And then I found out what lake it was on.
Yeah.
And I haven't breathed a word of it. I will tell you that. And I will probably never fish that lake. But it's always interesting for me to know.
Right.
Yep.
It's a good lake. And it was funny because that day, I'll be honest, Tom whooped our butts. He was catching fish left and right. And we actually used some of his strategy to catch more fish because everyone was kind of had their own mindset. We had guys that were out there for days and weeks pre-fishing and doing their thing. And that was your first time on that lake.
Yeah. First time.
So Tom rolled up and he started, I know he was fishing a drop kick packed with maggots.
Yep. Gold drop kick packed with spikes. Yep.
And what he was doing differently than the rest of us is we were running around kind of like chickens with our heads cut off, where Tom was kind of staying put in certain spots. He was marking some fish with his Vexlar and just focusing on the ones that were coming through. And I remember when you caught that fish, I don't know what I was doing. I was probably 50 yards away. Yeah. And I see Tom walking back with this fish in his hands, and I thought it was a crappie. I'm like, oh, he's got a good crappie, and we were keeping a couple for pictures and doing that thing, and he comes walking up. He's like, this is a bluegill. The thing was an absolute giant, and he says 10 and a quarter, 1-1, but if you saw how tall this fish was, I mean, it was an absolute moose. It was pretty fun to watch. You nailed it, Jason. You said, the memories of some of these fish catches. Yeah, PB always, but that was pretty sweet. Everyone was pretty. When you got guys like Adam Griffith and Matt Waldron sitting there, geeking over a fish you catch, right? Some of these guys are the best in the game.
Right.
Pretty darn cool.
Yeah,
that was a fun one to watch.
Coolest part for me was having Gens there, seeing that, and him weighing it and measuring it and everything for me. It was pretty cool.
Yep. When Gens gets excited about a bluegill, when he gets out the magical, we should bump that thing and then weigh it.
Right.
And pretty darn cool. Pretty fun stuff. Yeah, no, that's you named it, man. Making memories is important. I remember a fun guide trip this year. I had a back-to-back group trip. It was different groups, and I did it on purpose just because I needed to borrow some gear from Clam, some extra hub houses and things like that. Actually, I shouldn't say Clam. I went to Tom and said, hey, dude, here's some things I'm going to need. I got to take 12, 15 people out fishing, and remember how cold it was?
Yeah.
It was like 15 below zero, and I'm like, we're going to have to hub house it up. And both of these groups had maybe one or two people that fished at all or regular basis. The rest were pretty green, understand the concept, have done it, maybe in a past life. And it was a blast to get them out fishing and just see the excitement when you put them on top of bluegills, whether they're 5 inches, 7 inches, whatever, just seeing that pure excitement. And these are grown adults. These aren't 5-year-old kids, right? These are, some were in their 60s, just to see the pure excitement that the sport can bring. And I remember I had my son help me with one of the days, Jack, on the Saturday. And that was really one of his first guide trips in the winter, other than just kind of being there as a body. He actually contributed a ton, and just seeing all excitement he had for it too. It's just fun. I think, Jason, one thing you're so good at, and not to toot your horn, but obviously our listeners know who you are and what you do. You're a teacher by trade, right? But I think that's your strength in this industry, is the teaching side. And I think that's why people gravitate towards you, Scott Brower, right? We have many anglers on our pro staff that are like that because of that teaching aspect. You hit something, you made a comment that I hold really near and dear to my heart as a guide. One of your statements on your 4 bullet point text was it's not too difficult at times. This isn't an egotistical comment, but as a guide, you're on the fish, right? It's not always too difficult to say, oh, you want to go catch 20 bluegills and take them home for dinner, right? As guides, we figure that stuff out. But what's more important as a guide, in my opinion, is can that person go home that night and the next day do it again on their own? Can they catch those fish? Did they get enough intel to go, I don't have a rod like that. You know what? I never would have thought of using 2-pound tests. I might want to disregard this 8-pound test coily line on my rod. Just the little things we take for granted. The biggest success stories for me always come in the form of clients the next day or the next week or even the next year going, hey, Matt, you know what? When we went fishing, you taught me this or that or this or whatever. Now I can do this on my own, or check this out, or just getting excited when they go out and find fish and catch them and go, hey, you know what? Plastics really do work. And man, I caught a bunch of nice crappies. Thank you. I think as educators, promoters of this sport, that's ultimately our goal, is to get people excited and to be able to make decisions on their own, enjoy the sport on their own, and then go on and teach someone else. To me, that's your big success story.
that's why I am such a huge advocate and fan of the Women Anglers of Minnesota. I think that organization is absolutely outstanding, and giving women the confidence to be independent in whether it's open water angling or ice angling, and to see how that has blossomed over the years.
Yes.
And how they're constantly focused on education. But I don't know if I've ever told you this, Matt, but okay, for the listeners, I'm going into year 31 as a fishing guide. I started guiding when I was 15. And when I started this business as a kid, I had one main philosophy, and that was that I was going to teach people enough about fishing that they wouldn't have to hire me again.
Yep.
And it's a horrible business plan, but there were people that would repeatedly come back because they wanted to learn more, or they wanted to learn about other lakes, or some people, they just wanted to come back for another experience. And then it was easy. It was convenient. But that was my whole idea, that I wanted to give people that power to go and do it on their own. And if you're apprehensive about whether it's ice fishing or open water fishing, whatever it is, just try it. Take whatever skills you have and use them. And you're going to get better and better at it no matter what.
Yes. That's really good advice. No, absolutely. I thought I would have figured your clients are coming back for more cooked cheese.
Well, that's just been within the last few years. But yeah, I even that, we talk about memories, having memories. And I don't just do it in the boat. I'll do it on the ice too. And I know you love to cook, and you cook for your clients, even if it's something so simple as, Johnsonville brats.
Yep.
But people remember that. That's something they remember. If I cook cheese out on the ice, they go, cheese, what do you mean? And you cook it. And maybe we don't even catch any fish. And they go, oh, but the cheese was really good. I remember that. So who'd you go out with? I don't know, but he cooked cheese. Oh, you went with Jason.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. And just to defend myself, days where we don't catch fish, that's an anomaly. You know that too. That
yeah.
People they ask me a lot. I'm sure you get this question a lot too. Like, do you ever have days where you don't catch anything? And in 31 years, I could count them on one hand.
Yeah, right. I would agree. I mean, every time I see bread cheese at a store now, didn't we see it the other day, Tom?
Oh, yeah.
At Cub Foods, and we're like, oh, Durham's cheese over there. It's like you've become synonymous with bread cheese, and I still haven't done it.
I was hoping I'd become synonymous with, I don't know, like Sophie fish or something like that. But if this is all I achieve in my lifetime, so be it.
Oh, you've been synonymous with a lot of things in our hearts, Jason. Trust me. And I think our listeners would probably say the same thing. It's cool that you mentioned WHAM and Wisconsin Women Fish. There's so many great organizations out there getting gals involved in the sport. It's funny because I didn't know this about WHAM until after I got involved with WHAM from a clan perspective, that my mom's best friend was one of the original 10 members.
No way.
And I didn't know that. And I knew my mom's friend Sharon loved to fish, and her late husband loved to fish. And because I remember when I was a kid and I was obsessed with fishing, we would talk fishing. But never did I know that Sharon was really tight with Sybil, who started WHAM.
Yes.
And
Sybil Smith.
Yeah, Sybil was an amazing author. I have a bunch of her books, a couple that are signed. I've met her many times. She's wonderful.
And for the listeners, is inducted into the Minnesota Fishing Hall of Fame.
Yep.
She's an incredible person.
If anyone read any of the Twin Cities fishing guides, there was a very, very, in my opinion, as a kid, the most sought after book that would sell out at the bookstore because they'd bring in 3. She wrote all those, and she would actually interview Ron Shera, the Grizz. I did a little bit of piece when I was younger, and a number of people to get these fishing reports, and she'd publish these books with maps and everything. And this lake has these species in it, and here's what I would use to catch them. Just wonderful. But it was kind of funny to see that come full circle, and to know that here, my lady that was at my house once or twice a week, at some point when I was little, because WHAM is older than me. It's older than 40 plus years. I'll be 40 in May. That when I was a little kid, she was probably a part of that, and I had no idea. Pretty awesome.
A couple weeks ago, I went to a fundraiser for the Minnesota Fishing Hall of Fame and Minnesota Fishing Museum, which for the listeners, if you've never been to the Minnesota Fishing Museum in Little Falls, put that on your bucket list. You might think, what do they have there? A couple lures or whatever. It is a complete history of fishing in Minnesota, and it will jog so many memories that you have of angling. It's amazing. It's an incredible place.
Yeah.
But I went to this fundraiser for it, Night with the Pros, where they have a number of professional fishermen that come in, and you sit at a table, and different organizations or individuals will buy seats at those tables so they can chat with the anglers throughout the event. And I was actually sitting at a table that was purchased by the women anglers of Minnesota. And the Little Falls high school fishing team was helping out with the event with some of the raffles and door prizes and busing tables, things like that. Well, when it was time to eat, those anglers had to find a seat at tables that were open. And there were 2 seats at our table, so these kids come and sit down. And the one was just kind of sitting and listening and taking everything in. And he had a hat on that said Crappie Chronicles. And so the guy that I was sitting with, Luke Henches, and Luke's a great dude. His girlfriend is big into the women anglers of Minnesota, and Luke's got a YouTube channel. You want to learn about catching huge catfish and sturgeon, check out Luke's channel. But anyway, Luke asked this kid, he goes, Crappie Chronicles, huh? He goes, who's your favorite guy on there? And the kid goes, Griff. And right away I go, oh, you like the old guy? And he goes, he's not that old. And I went, that was the exact right answer, because Griff and I are about the same age. And Adam's just a great, great dude. And for this kid to say this, I was like, oh yeah, I'm not old yet.
Yeah. Griff is amazing. And I know we're over the hour mark, but who cares? I got one story about Griff, and it was one of my more memorable fish catches this year. I got a 16 1/4 inch crappie, pretty much because of Adam Griffith. And
yeah,
we were chasing fish. We went to a new lake. We were trying to get a big one, and we were struggling. I mean, we had power on the ice. We had Griff, Clayton Kettering, Mike Raymond, Brennan Schutte. I mean, Adam Bartusek. I mean, we had absolute power on the ice. That's the crew you want, right? And we went to a second lake, and we went to the basin, and we caught a bunch of little runs. And it was me and Griff as a team, and then the other guys as a team, just kind of scouting. And all of a sudden, Griff gets like this sixth sense, and he's like, I'm going to go check the edge of this basin over here. And he goes over there, and this wasn't his lake. He didn't know it. It's not like he had a bite. He hadn't even been out there. He goes to the edge of this lake. He drops down his forward-facing sonar. He scans around. And I'm over here in the basin still trying to find another school. And he calls me, and he's like, come over here. You want to sharpshoot a giant? And I'm like, yeah, okay, I see you guys do this on the Chronicles. I mean, I guess all the young kids are doing it. Let's try it out. And I rip over there, and Griff had his daughter with him, this cutest little girl you've ever met in your life. Just, I think she's 3 or 4. I don't know exactly. Just a sweetheart running around, hanging out with him. And Griff is one of the most selfless guides I know. And he loves to see others catch a giant.
Yep.
And he can catch them. I don't know if there's a better guy than him at catching a giant when it comes to crappies. And he's like, hey, Matt, look at this. And I look at his forward-facing sonar, and he's like, see these fish? I'm like, yeah, I'm seeing that over there too. And he's like, look at that one right there. And he points to one mark. See that one? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, well, he's turned right now. Give me a second. You'll see. And all of a sudden the thing turns again. And I'm like, oh, that's a good one. He goes, we're going to catch that one. I'm like, what? 50 feet away. And there's 200 fish in front of us. He goes, we're going to catch that one. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, go punch on it. I'll tell you what it does. So I go over there and punch a hole on it. Thing moves, I don't know, 5 feet. He's like, oh, it moved, because he can see where my auger is. Come towards me. He actually said, I take that back. He goes, come towards me 7 feet. Any one of us in this room, there's 2 of us, would have said, come forward 5 feet, right? Come forward 10 feet. Right. No, Griff goes, come forward 7 feet. I'm like, what the heck is 7 feet? So I started walking. He's like, stop, right there. I punch a hole. He goes, you're on him. And I grab my Vex, I grab my Pinhead Pro. I go, did it move? And he goes, nope, he's sitting there. Drop the Vex down, and I see one good mark and a bunch of other fish. I drop down. This fish comes up. I set the hook. I land it. It's 16 1/4. I set the hook. Griff comes running over, and I'm fighting this fish, and he's smiling, and he comes running over, kneels down, rolls up his sleeves. And I'm like, I don't know, man, this thing sure feels like a bass. And he's like, well, it could be. Like, they're probably mixed in, I'm sure. And then all of a sudden we both looked at each other when the rod pumped twice. And we both go, this is a crappie. He lands this fish. He lays it on the ice. He smiles. He walks away. Like, I just sat there. I didn't have words. I'm like, you are the best in the game at doing this. He truly is. It's a special gift. And the Chronicles brag about Griff, but they see it all the time, right? And when you get a chance to see someone do that, I mean, I look at sports, right? You have your phenomenal basketball players, your phenomenal football players that go on a D1 and go on and play for an NFL team. In the caliber of crappie fishing through the ice, Griff's that guy. He's that guy. Like, he is that. If there was a NBA or NFL of crappie fishing through the ice, he would be that guy. And it was pretty cool to see that. And that I went home and was telling Jack, my kid, I'm just like, dude, this dude is on another planet. And he just looked at me, smiled, and walked away. Like, he wasn't even like, he was just like, look, I could see it in his eyes. He's like, told you. Like, yeah, that's wasn't that hard. There you go. Two and a half pounder. Freak show fish.
Here's just a 16-inch crappie.
Yeah, and he's just like, yep. He just goes, told you. And I'm like, my gosh. So that's probably one of my more memorable fish catches of this year, was just the whole process of how that went down. Was just, the dude is on another planet.
Well, that's a great memory to have from this season, that's for sure. Yeah. And I know one that you'll reflect on this summer, and that's what's going to drive you to get back on the ice next year.
Oh yeah. And you're right on. The memories are where it's at. I mean, our trip to ice shots on Leech Lake with sideways snow and blowing wind, and, Tom and I and a handful of us that Saturday, or when it was snowing sideways, how many times we just look at each other and laugh?
Yeah.
I mean,
countless times.
Absolute blizzard. We're out on Leech Lake doing a photo shoot, and just said, we're going to do it. Let's push through it. I got to watch Tom jump a snowbank on the Bearcat.
Oh yeah, that was fun.
He got the whole machine airborne.
Yep.
So, no, those are right. Those are the memories from hanging out with each other, our team here, our pros, my family, the UPL members. I mean, those are the things that keep me going back into ice fishing. Is probably the memories, the excitement, the fun. Yeah, it's our job. I get it to some capacity. Whether you're a fishing guide, whether Tom and I work at Clam. But I'll tell you what, that's not what drives us. It's the excitement for the sport. It's the friendships. It's the memories. It's the Dave Gens Invitationals, like Jason said. It's all that kind of stuff, I think, that keeps us going, and really it keeps that spark lit. So, no, man, I don't know
I will say for this podcast, one thing that's kept me going, and I just need to say a big thanks to everybody who's listened this year, in our first season, that the positive comments that I've gotten from the listeners, absolutely outstanding. Thanks for reaching out. Don't think that it doesn't have an impact, because it absolutely does. And that drives us to keep doing what we're doing too.
Yeah. And I would say for those listening, I mean, fire away some ideas this summer. If there's a topic, I mean, we'll tread lightly, because if me and Jason, we're probably going to go on a tangent 4 minutes into the podcast, but we'd love if people want to learn something specific. I mean, we can cater to that, and maybe find that right guest to break down, something specific or something broad we want to learn. And that's the beauty of it. I mean, we do this because we want the audience to be engaged and enjoy it and learn something and have fun and be entertained. I don't do it to hear myself talk, because I can talk to this chair for 3 hours straight. So, yeah, I mean, that's good advice, Jason, and a good call out. I mean, our listeners are why we ultimately do this. It is a whole lot of fun. We're going to try to get creative next year and bring on some new guests, and maybe look outside the box and that sort of stuff. Maybe not just live inside the fishing world, but maybe bring in someone else from a different perspective. I don't know yet. We'll continue to think. We'll be dangerous enough and have enough idle hands over the next 6 months to come up with some pretty cool ideas, I think.
Absolutely.
So I don't know, any parting comments, Tom or Jason, we want to send our listeners before we sign off for season 1 of the Ice Team podcast?
Nothing that I can think of. I think you covered everything.
Yeah. If anyone sees Tom, I'm telling you right now, listeners, if anyone sees Tom at a sport show or an event next year, buy him lunch. Because I'm telling you right now, if you walk through the clam booth and you're happy and you're engaged and you're enjoying it, you can fist bump that dude right there for a lot of the work that goes into it. So that's my simple Tom send off.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
I owe Tom lots of lunches. Lots of lunches. I really do.
I'll take some of that bread cheese, Jason.
Oh, yeah. Well, good deal, man. Anything Durham before we roll out?
Just like ours, I just want to remind people, especially in this late part of the season, be safe, be smart, and be a hero. Take somebody fishing.
You got it. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. This was season 1 of the Ice Team podcast. I know I had a blast. So on behalf of Jason Durham, Matt Johnson, we got Tom Hine here and Drew Aspinwall, who is actually in Canada right now trying to catch a lake trout. I know he missed being on this one. Thank you so much, and we'll catch everybody next season.